There were two ideas that drastically altered my entire life trajectory during 2024. One of them is a question, and the other is a concept. And it's these two things that I want to talk about with you here today to help shape wherever you are in life. And specifically, as we move forward into a new year, at the time of this recording, it is December 29th, 2024. And so as we go in to 2025, these are two things I think would be very important to be thinking about. At least they were for me. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Seeds of Success podcast. And on today's episode, I'm not going to get into the details of where this all stems from. There will be most likely another time and place where I actually want to share some of those details of my very personal life. But for you, what is going to be super important is first, this question. And this was a question when I first heard it. It was in a newsletter written by Sahil Bloom, which stopped me dead in my tracks when I first read this thing. And it was one of those questions where I went back and I read it again. And then it ultimately really can help you reframe the way that you're thinking about decisions to be made in your life or where to take your life, or if you're trying to work through something that you are seeking clarity on. And so this is the question right here. And I'm reading this off of my phone as I just wrote about this on my LinkedIn post yesterday. And here it is. If you were the main character in the movie of your life, what would the audience be screaming at you to do right now? I'm going to read that again. If you were the main character in the movie of your life, what would the audience be screaming at you to do right now? This is something, and it's like, when we're making big, scary, potentially life-altering decisions, right? Personal life, relationships, career, making a move to a different state, a different country, taking that trip, leaving a job, taking a promotion, embarking on a new health fitness challenge, or starting a business, or not starting that business, or stopping your business, or taking on, something that has magnitude, right? Or maybe it doesn't have to be so drastically big. Maybe it can just be, to sign up for, a race, a 5K, a 10K, or make a small habit change in your life, or, whether to call that person or not, right? But ultimately, this was a question that proved very pivotal for me when I read this. And if that's you and you're reading this and this just stopped you in your tracks as well, or at least causes you to take a really critical second to take a step back and pause and look at your life with this question in mind. If you're just running through this movie, and oftentimes in these movies we see the main character veering off track, right? And they're losing sight of ultimately either what matters most or what the priorities are, or what just makes total sense from the outsider point of view. This can be helpful to ultimately detach from emotions, detach from feelings, and being very in these things that we're consumed by, decisions to be made, and give us a bird's eye view, a 30,000 foot view to see the surroundings of our life, to see the surroundings of your life, and kind of what are some of those other factors at play. If we can detach from the result, detach from the emotions, right? And ultimately just have a more biased point of view, if you will, or maybe thinking about it like, what would you recommend a friend to do or a family member to do in this situation? Something like this can just totally rearrange your perspective to whether it helps you make a decision or not. I believe that enabling some sort of different perspective or point of view can be super important to making decisions, right? Oftentimes it can be like a no-brainer. Like, damn, I've really been like taking that step out and looking at you in a third person point of view with this, what would you be screaming at yourself to do if you're just on looking at your life? Like, that might almost just become a no-brainer of a decision. Be like, oh yeah, this makes total sense, right? So that's the first question that as I go into 2025, I'm still thinking about this question. right? I first learned about this question maybe like 8 months ago, and it resurfaced back in Sahil's newsletter of being one of the top 10 most important concepts that he talked about in his newsletters this year. And it just really triggered like how impactful that question was for me at a very important time of my life. And again, at some point, most likely we'll get into some more of the details surrounding that. And but then moving into the second concept here and the second idea that I think is super important as you continue moving into 2025, a new year, right? And just, thinking about things in your life, you hear it all the time. And it's so simple. It's one of those where it might be very simple, but not easy. And that is to trust your gut. To trust your gut, to trust your intuition, your instincts, right? Those things that you can feel inside of you, but it's hard to really, truly find reason or ration, right? Because our head is almost at conflict a lot of times with that gut feeling that we have, right? Our head is very logical, very rational, right? Can justify given situations based on context, which is super important, right? If we're talking life or death scenarios, or if we're needing to make, data-driven decisions, maybe it's in your work life or professional life or business or whatever it is, right? Like very important. And, like ultimately the way that I think about this is we essentially have two brains, the one in our head, right? And then the one that is deep down in our gut that is an intuition feeling that there is something that is greater than myself, that is a higher power, that is a mystical whatever, that is ultimately telling you something, right? And with this, in my own experience, right, like details aside, is I had, a gut instinct that was deep and dark and scary, and I continued to resist this thing. And as I continued to resist it, it persisted. Something that I learned from my coach throughout this time was what you resist persists. And that was me in the depths of this thing. And then the moment I made a decision that felt true and aligned with that gut feeling, it went away. And, that's a topic for a whole different time. But at the end of the day, like, I just want to encourage you to trust your gut because, it's one of those things that only you truly know what you feel. And sometimes we don't need to tell other people why or rationalize or reason with it because it can't be justified or reasoned. Sometimes you just either know or it's either a yes or a no, and there is no reason for it. And that's okay. That's okay. You truly only know what you are feeling. And so as we continue to move into this new year, these are two questions one question, one concept that as I was continuing to think about these things over the weekend, they kind of go hand in hand with each other, right? And what I want to encourage you to do is wherever you're at in your life, if you are listening to this in preparation for 2025, a new year, or you're looking to make a big decision or any sort of decision that you're struggling with, ask yourself that question, right? What would the audience be screaming at you to do right now? And then listen to that gut instinct. Okay, so I don't know if that's right now you need to stop this and take a pause and go and ask yourself that question and actually answer it right now. Usually when we ask ourselves these types of questions, we have an innate, immediate response, oftentimes a very natural gut instinct. And so then to go and listen to both of those things is something that I encourage you to do and to ultimately use them in tandem to go make whatever decision it is that you're either thinking about or a new life or something that you're trying to create, whatever it may be for you personally. And so as we continue, as we start to lean out of this episode here, I started thinking about Steve Jobs, right? He was a very intuitional thinker, very spiritual being and presence. And, I'm going to paraphrase something that he said, but it was to listen to your gut, your heart, and your intuition, because they somehow already know what you truly want to become. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Seeds of Success podcast. If you got to the end of this episode, can you please do me a huge favor and leave a 5-star rating and review? This helps me be able to reach out to bigger guests and also be able to get access to special events and activities that otherwise would not be possible without your support. So if you could please take just 3 seconds and leave a 5-star rating and review, it would mean the world to me, and I will see you on the next episode.